But the issue of trade enforcement has come up, and I just want to put a point on that. Enforcement is absolutely critical. Ensuring that our trading partners and the U.S. have mechanisms that are efficient to enforce trade, but also as we negotiate agreements, and I agree with many of my colleagues, and I have some disagreement with our own with the Biden administration on this point. We need an aggressive trade agenda, and we need it to be a trade agenda that comes through the United States Congress and includes congressional advice and consent, which is more sustainable, number one, but also gives us the opportunity as we negotiate with our trading partners to insist that they enact reforms in their own domestic practices, their legal structure, in order to make sure that we do have free and fair trade. This is really an important point. Now, the issue of corn obviously has been covered. I won't get further into that, but my corn growers certainly do need to have the technical aspects of USMCA adhered to and not have, for cultural reasons, the President of Mexico decide to go in a different direction. It needs to be a science-based decision, and we hope that we can hold them accountable to that. But I want to touch on another area that's I know important to me and also to the folks here in Minnesota, and that has to do with sugar. Sugar growers support 144,000 jobs over the U.S., 2,000 local family sugar beet growers that I represent are absolutely dependent on that aspect of our economy. And these jobs are regularly threatened by unfair trade practices across the world that allows sugar to be sold at below production costs, undercutting American farmers. We have to ensure that we have trade tools to ensure American farmers can fairly compete and support the American workers. Now, last year, Congressman Earl Blumenauer and I traveled to the Dominican Republic to meet with workers there, and what we saw, I would say, is the closest thing that I've ever seen to modern slavery. Workers who were forced into dangerous working conditions, didn't receive the pay they were due often, living in abhorrent housing conditions. Forced labor has no place in the U.S. supply chain, and that's why I've been proud to work to make sure that we can get enforcement actions against those Dominican operations and ensure that we protect the ability for American growers to produce a high-quality product and get a fair price. So, as we move forward in a Farm Bill year, an important initiative that we have to support is the U.S. sugar farmers and the U.S. sugar program and push back against what some would argue for, and that is that we need to be more dependent on imports of sugar, even though we already import sugar from over 40 countries. This is a really important part of our agriculture policy in this country, and I wonder if Mr. Werdish and Ms. Olson, as leaders of the two largest farm organizations in Minnesota, can you talk about the sugar program and how important that is in the Farm Bill to Minnesota members, because I know it's important to the folks I represent back home in Michigan.
I'll go first. Thank you, Congressman and Chairman. In Minnesota Farm Bureau, we rely on the expertise of the two large sugar cooperatives in the state of Minnesota. We don't have a lot of our own policy on sugar because it is so complicated, but we would argue again for equitable trade and free trade for sugar as well, because we do have many members that raise sugar beets in our membership base as well. But it's not something that I'm an expert on, and it is very complicated as well. So I'll defer to Mr. Werdish.
Gary?
Thank you. Sugar obviously is very important to Minnesota, and we have two in Minnesota. We have one right across in Breckman or in Wahpeton. So we have three cooperatives, farmer-owned cooperatives, within Minnesota and the Red River Valley, and we are the largest producing area in the whole United States in beet sugar. The U.S. sugar program has worked very well as a no-cost program when it's run effectively, and it has. And for the most part, the USDA has done a good job administering that program. It's set up with TRQs, various, because we do need to import some sugar. We don't raise enough for ourselves. But at the same time, sugar on the global market, a lot of countries, they use the slave labor or whatever it is to produce it, and they dump that in the world market at 6 cents a pound or whatever number they have. You'll hear pressure from our confectionaries. I forget the exact acronym of their organization that we need to get rid of the sugar program because our consumers are paying so much more for a price for their candy bars and all that stuff. But the sugar program has run very effectively for a long time. I still remember when Kiki Garza was the chairman of the Ag Committee from Texas a long time ago. I'm an original sugar beet grower. I'm an original grower from the Renville plant. I don't raise anymore, so I do have a long history in that industry, and it's been very profitable. The jobs that we provide out of them plants are very profitable paying jobs in rural communities. That's what we need to do, and that's, as I talked about earlier, we need domestic policy too. And the more of those type of jobs we can have in rural communities, we all benefit. But Farmers Union, very strong supporter of the sugar program.
Thank you.